Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
The Deputy Prime Minister delivers the budget communication in the House of Assembly. That story straight ahead.
Room for tax reductions and elimination in this year's budget. The story coming up.
The leader of the opposition responds to the budget statement, calling it shocking and biased. That and more tonight on our news.
Well, National Insurance Minister gives us a response on those 4 executives that were sent home. That story straight ahead.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina McNeil. Topping news tonight, the government intends to borrow $722 million. Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest introducing a resolution to borrow $400 million to help finance the government's projected shortfall for the 2016-2017 fiscal year, while leader of government business Renward Wells introduced a second resolution to borrow $322 million for the 2017-2018 fiscal year. Turnquest also revealing that the GFS deficit is projected to be a whopping $500 million, $400 million more than what was forecasted. Turnquest accusing the former administration of leaving the cupboards bare. Our team coverage tonight begins with Jasmine Brown. Jasmine?
That's right, Christina. The Deputy Prime Minister called the GFS deficit astounding as he insisted the government will have to borrow nearly $500 million to cope with the financial situation they met when they came in office.
Turnquest accused the Christie administration of poor governance and gross mismanagement, insisting it was no surprise the Bahamian people sent them packing on May 10th.
Let me be quite blunt. The fiscal situation in the current fiscal year is far, far bleaker than we could ever have imagined. Our predecessors have literally left us with the cupboard totally bare.
According to Turnquest, during the 5 years of the Christie administration, the government incurred a total cumulative deficit of over $2.2 billion, and the outstanding government direct debt mushroomed to $6.5 billion, or 71.5% of GDP. Turnquest says the situation was especially bleak given the fact that the GFS deficit at the end of June is projected at $500 million. That's up from the $100 million forecast by the Christie administration. But he admitted that Hurricane Matthew played a role in that increase.
That is an astonishing 5 times the budget forecast of only 12 months ago. The sharp deterioration in the state of the public finances in 2016-17 did admittedly flow to some extent from the multifaceted impacts of Hurricane Matthew in early October 2016.
Madam Leader.
On one hand, the hurricane severely dampened economic activity in October, with the impact extended and through to the 4th quarter of the year. As a result, it is estimated that real GDP in 2016 posted a 0 rate of growth for the year as a whole, as compared to the budgeted rate of 0.5%. This directly weakened revenue collections.
Turnquest says if that weren't bad enough, there is an excess of $300 million in outstanding payments and commitments left by the former government.
The latest information has this backlog in excess of $320 million, and it is possible that this number could increase before the end of the year as we get a greater understanding of the many deals of the former administration. And I want to pause there because as we talk this number, I want the Bahamian people to know that we don't have the final number yet, that every day we're discovering new commitments and new bills. This high level of outstanding payables is directly responsible for the government seeking emergency funding to meet the obligations of the 2016-17 budget, as vendors are clamoring for payments.
Right now.
It is our intention to fully pay all of this backlog of payments
The Deputy Prime Minister also hit out at how revenue from value-added tax was used to finance new spending on what he termed so-called priority spending programs like NHI, Junkanoo Carnival, and roadside contracts.
These programs included $30 million in the current fiscal year for roadside contracts in New Providence under the aegis of the Beaches and Parks Authority. And it's important to know that that program was only budgeted at about $3 million. $25 million over 3 years for Bahamas Junkanoo Carnival, and over $10 million in consulting fees for an incomplete, and I was going to use another words, but I'll say what was written, National Health Insurance Program.
In addition to elaborating on the current financial state, the Deputy Prime Minister also elaborated on taxes. Kyle Joaquin has that angle.
That's right, Jasmine. That budget communication also spoke to the reduction of business license taxes, the elimination of customs duty on certain health items, as well as the elimination or reduction of import duties on certain food items as well. The new government today revealing plans to eliminate or reduce import duties on a number of food and beverage items,
including milk, yogurt and ice cream, bread, cakes, pastries and chips, salmon fillets, shrimp and prawns, pastas and pizza sauce, fruit drinks, canned or preserved vegetables, jams, fruit jellies and marmalades, and fruit or nut purees, mixtures of fruits and nuts, and soy sauce.
It was just one part of the numerous tax relief measures Finance Minister Peter Turnquest mentioned in his budget communication. But what was missing? The F&M's promised elimination of value-added tax on breadbasket items, which was stressed while the party was still in opposition and on the campaign trail. Shortly after his communication, Turnquest explained to reporters why.
No, that's not going to happen immediately. That's one of the trade-offs that we had to do, because when we recognize that, for instance, in the Ministry of Work, they've overspent by $75 million this last year. $75 million. Nobody could have ever imagined that. And so we immediately, literally 2 days ago, had to say, well, wait a minute, let's be conservative before we go out giving out concessions. Let's make sure that we've got the house covered.
Government is also seeking to eliminate or reduce import duties on a number of personal care and other products, as well as household items. As for business license tax,
we are reducing the rate of business license tax from 1.5% to 1.25% of turnover. And for hotels with turnover exceeding $400 million, from 1.25% to 1% of turnover. The latter to follow through on a commitment of the previous administration to Brookfield, the owners of Atlantis.
Customs duty will be eliminated on certain medical supplies and equipment like x-ray machines, breathing apparatus, dental cements, and fillings, to name a few. There is also something in the budget for contractors and those looking to build.
We are eliminating or reducing import duties on a number of building materials, including sheets of veneers, wood flooring of various materials, wooden forms for concrete pouring, wooden posts and beams, asphalt shingles, Durock and cement panel boards, and other cement panels and sheets.
We may see more motorcycles on the road. Government is reducing excise duty on electronic motorcycles from 65% to 25%. And as for all the paperwork when clearing customs, the government is seeking to amend the Customs Management Act to better accommodate a paperless customs process. Now, following that budget communication from the Minister of Finance, the opposition also had their response. For that, we go to our Giorgio Bain. Giorgio?
That's right, Kyle. The leader of the opposition, Philip Brave Davis, says he found it shocking that the Free National Movement would use the budget statement as a grounds for political bashing and later present their plans to borrow an unprecedented $722 million.
It is also shocking that the F&M government is within its first weeks borrowing an unprecedented $722 million to run the business of the government.
Hurricane Matthew is to blame for the Progressive Liberal Party's prediction on the GFS deficit being off target, according to Davis.
It is not mismanagement at all.
Davis also responded to the finance minister's assertion that the Christie administration left the public purse empty. According to Davis, if that were true, Turnquest would not have been able to predict future economic growth.
This is evidenced, amongst other things, by the International Monetary Fund that predicts that this year the economy will grow by 1.4% and will be followed by a 2.2% growth next year. Indeed, the government itself is predicting a 3.3% growth for next year, which must be a testament to the prudent management of the PLP government.
Turnquest also hit out at costly commitments made under the PLP government just weeks ahead of the general election, including $30 million sidewalk contracts.
We take grave exception to the issue of expenditure in the run-up to the general election as deals. There are no deals, but expenditure in the public interest.
Angleton MP Glenys Hannah Martin also chimed in on that point, asserting that it's hypocritical for the FNM to criticize the former government for making commitments ahead of the general election. She insisted that the last Ingram administration, which Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis was a member of, did the same thing.
The concept of not so much the proximity to an election, but the motivation or the motive for signing a bribery was the term used. And as indicated by the leader, in this case, on examination, we'll have to see what they're talking about. You will see a lot of these things were projects which were projected and trained from that time. So the issue was not just that you did it before an election. The question is, why were you doing it, and what was your objective at that time? And and that is what he's referring to, because in Cat Island itself, I use that as an example. You had the candidate sitting down, signing remember? As
a witness.
Yes, as a witness, just before an election.
The opposition say they now look forward to having a vigorous debate concerning the budget statement. Our April Sands was also at the House of Assembly and spoke with the Minister in charge of National Insurance, Brenzel Roll, concerning the NIB audit. April?
Well, thanks, Giorgio. Despite speculation and concern over those 4 senior executives that were sent home with no pre-warned notion, Minister of Public Service and National Insurance, Brenzel Roll, says he sees nothing unusual about it. One day after opposition leader Philip Brave Davis demanded an explanation from Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis over the dismissal of 4 executives at National Insurance Board, Minister of State for National Insurance and Public Service, Brenzel Roll, said the decision was made as a mandate by the people.
I think the government made a decision as mandated by the people. We are looking at NIB and executives who had vacation and other executives. We determined which persons would be critical to us, and that decision was made.
4 senior executives were told to take vacation leave effective Tuesday, May 30th. Opposition leader Philip Brave Davis described their dismissal as a flagrant violation of the rights of these individuals, claiming the government has abrogated the terms of employment. The former Deputy Prime Minister added that without clarification from the Minnis administration, the country can only conclude that the dismissal was the result of rank victimization. We asked Roll why 4 executives were dismissed without consulting the board, as mandated by the NIB Act.
The NIB board NIB comes under the government of the Bahamas, which it's under the portfolio of the Prime Minister, and that's a decision of the government of the Bahamas.
The decision to send those persons home comes as government moves ahead with its forensic audits at certain government agencies, including NIB. Roll said no discrepancies have been discovered thus far at the National Insurance Board.
We're not aware of any discrepancy at the moment, but we took a proactive step since the government determined that there was going to be an audit of NIB, and since individuals at the executive level had some vacations, they took their vacations. And, vacations are normally done both ways. Persons could ask us and it's granted, or persons, we could require them to take vacation that they have acquired from the board.
Roll said also, as far as the NIB audit goes, it is about ensuring there is a clean house. Well, Roll also noted that there's no official timeline for the NIB audit to be completed. Until further notice, it's back to you, Christina.
Thanks, April. Still to come on our news, the National Security Minister says murders won't stop because there's a new government. That's coming up when our news returns.